Thank you, Nadia. So I thought I'd challenge myself in this talk today by trying to do a presentation only with hashtags and only with Instagram. So basically, I'm going to talk to you through the means of 10 hashtags and 10 Instagrams. And so that was a challenge to me. The challenge I'll have for you is to maybe redefine what your notion of product is, to be a little larger than just what your current notion is. And so to get started, I wanted to get a show of hands here of who in this room here is a founder of a company. Okay. Now keep your hands up. Who in this room aspires to be a founder or thinks at some point in their life they'll want to found a company as well? It's like almost everyone in this room. Yeah, that's what I thought. So when you start a company, really it starts out with something that starts out as a thought, something that comes out of you, right? And so the way I'd like to reposition the way you think about product is product really is an extension of you as an individual, as a founder. And you are an extension of the product. So you are actually part of your product. And so if that's the case, if you believe that, then the question is, how do you market and sell yourself, right? So we'll go through a series of these, and I'll give a little bit of commentary on each. We'll start out with the notion of personal brand, right? You, if you're on Twitter, or if you're on Google+, or if you participate in social media, which I imagine is pretty much everyone who's here, whether you want it or not, whether you think you are or not, you are a personal brand. You're emitting a signal out there every single day, and that signal is a reflection of you, and that's how people perceive you, and that's how their perception of you is shaped. So you are a personal brand already, whether you want it or not, right? Now the question is, are you the personal brand that you want to be? If you were to look at yourself through the lens of social media, is this the person you think you are? Is this the person you want to project, right? So I'm going to step through a notion of how to be a personal brand and how to be more deliberate around that, and basically why it's important to think of your product as yourself as well. So the first notion is, in order to build a personal brand, one of the things you want to do is you want to exude thought leadership. Basically, you want to be known and recognized and build up credibility in a narrow field of interest. Typically, if you already have a product, if you are heading up a startup, you want to build up a thought leadership. You want to build up a reputation around what your product or service does really well. And typically, it's something that you're passionate with. Otherwise, why would you be working on this product, right? And so, thought leadership. How do you convey thought leadership, right? Well, in order to convey thought leadership, you need to express yourself. And social media is great for that, right? Twitter is a self-expression platform. You can self-express on Facebook. Blogging is great as well. But again, you need to express yourself around themes that you want to be recognized as an expert on. The second piece of conveying your personal brand is not only to convey this thought leadership, but not to do it in a dry fashion, like A plus B equals C or whatever. That's kind of boring, right? The way that you really engage your audience, the way that you are able to connect not only at the head level, but also at the heart level with your audience, which is much deeper, right? Which is the part that you need to connect with to really be able to convince your audience to engage with you deeper and actually eventually buy your product, is at the emotional level. And the best way and the best means to do that is not just to convey facts, but really to weave a story that people can relate to and understand. So you need to become really good at storytelling around what it is you're a thought leader about, but also around the things that you're really passionate about. And lastly, all of these things, one of the big mechanisms for doing this is through content marketing. And Guillaume is actually going to be speaking about this in his talk, lean content marketing. So I'm not going to get into the details of it, but really what it is you convey your thought leadership and your stories through content, but content is not the end of what you're trying to do, right? The content, it really is, the sole purpose of content is for you to convey something of value to your audience, right? To convey value. And the value can take the shape of many different things, but the main things that you need to articulate your content around in terms of value are oftentimes it's just entertainment. People love entertaining content, and that's fine, right? But typically it's around educating your audience, around inspiring your audience, around calling them to action, right? So 3 tenets of of personal branding, right? So what is the goal of personal branding? Why would you want to be seen as an expert? Why would you want to emit this content that people can connect to and be entertained with and be edified by, right? Well, first thing is you emit content because you want people to engage with that content. You don't emit content because people are going to just click on it and tweet it out but not read it, right? You want people to read it. You want people to read the content, you want people to share the content, and you want people to engage with you through your content. You want people to reach out to you, right? You want to build relationships, and it's really about building relationships. And the types of relationships you want to build is not just one person at a time, but eventually, if you're really trying to build a scalable product, you want to build a community. Not a community around a community of people who love your product, right? That's great to have a community of people who love your product, and that's the main thing they have in common. But really, you want to build a community around the themes and the expertise that you're a thought leader around, and the things that you're passionate about, and that they're passionate about as well, right? And then the last piece around building relationships that some companies do really, really well and can be a real differentiator when you've got a field where nowadays sometimes it's really crowded when you're trying to enter a particular vertical, is customer service, right? You need to show love to your customers, to your users, right? And you need to be very responsive. And there's companies like Buffer who are really, really good at this. They've made it one of their key pillars of how they operate, right? I think they've got a happiness department. They've got happiness officers, which are their customer service people. And their sole purpose is to bring delight to their customers. And the metrics that they measure themselves on is how quickly do they get back to people, right? And they're very proud of this. I think their latest metric is on average, it was like, they get back to 90% of the people within less than an hour or half an hour, whatever it is. But it's a great metric to track, right? So, okay, great. You've got a personal brand, you've established yourself, you're publishing great content, you're a thought leader, you're developing these relationships. But what's the goal of all this? Is the end goal just relationships? Well, no, I mean, you need to make money, right? The goal is really to make money because you're building a business. Your product is actually a business as well, right? And so what do you do with these relationships, right? Once you've built up this credibility, once you've built up this authority on your subject matter, how do you leverage that? What do you leverage it for, right? And so there's three things that you need to keep in mind. The first piece of leverage is just ask. Ask, it's basically, the basics of marketing is you need to have a call to action. Tell your audience or ask your audience that now that you've built up a relationship with to do what you want them to do. And typically it's fill in a form or buy your product or whatever it is, right? In case you can't see this is in Martha's Vineyard last summer at the county fair. There was a goat that had this birthmark on the side. It's a question mark. So ask. If you don't ask, people aren't going to pay you, right? If you don't ask them to buy your product. And then the other thing to remember is strike while the iron's hot. So there's this notion I heard at a conference recently, which I thought was hilarious, which is there's this notion of buyers in heat. When a buyer gets out the credit card and they buy, they're in heat and they're ready to buy more, right? So why let them stop there and just buy whatever they're buying? The thing that you need to do then is really upsell. Take the opportunity when your buyers are in heat to actually, hey, would you like some fries and a drink with that, right? Or if you got a product, hey, this is additional features that are only $5 a month more. Would you like to add that on, right? So there's always an opportunity to upsell when you're actually making the sale, when you've asked and people are actually transacting with you. And then the other notion is, well, okay, now you've got these people, you started out with maybe a free product or a freemium product or a free trial period, and you hammer them with communications with great content, and each time you ask them and they don't take, right? Well, maybe they don't take because the commitment is too high or the price is too high. So then there's an opportunity always to downsell as well. And downsell is put in front of them something that's lower commitment, right? Maybe lower price. So it's always an opportunity. And again, the reason why you're building your personal brand and building these relationships is so that you can leverage them to do these three things really well. So in order to recap all this, I put it all on one slide here. It starts with your personal brand. If you look at the second column, thought leadership, storytelling, content marketing, really it's about projecting that brand, projecting content that's of value to your audience in order for your audience to engage with it, right? And to build relationships through community, customer service. And then the last piece is leverage those relationships then to actually get them to transact with you, right? And so really, if you look at this, I was listening to the talks earlier, and there's one person that did a really really good job at this, and was it Joe Blunt, right? Oh, Joe Stump, sorry. So if you look at his presentation, right, I don't think once in his presentation did he try to sell you on his product, right? At the end, I was like, what does this company do? I had to look it up online, right? But what he did is he exuded thought leadership. He told a story around it, right? And he did content marketing, right? He positioned himself and what he does and what his passion is totally aligned with what his company does, right? And now all of a sudden it's like, I have the trust, and he can leverage that trust to ask me to actually at least try out his product, right? So that's just an overall example of how this works really well, right? So, the overall notion, if we come back to, who's a founder and who wants to be a founder, right? If you want to be a founder, it means you probably don't have a product of your own yet, right? Well, I challenge you to start with your first product, and have your first product not necessarily be the idea you're going to develop, but have your first product be yourself. Build your personal brand. Do this because by the time you actually start building your actual product, you'll be ahead of the game. And so to wrap it up, if you enjoyed this talk, my ask of you is to follow us on Twitter. This is my wife, Kelly. She's at Twylah. I'm at Kabayim. And I'll open up for any questions.
I personally found challenges between building my personal brand and then transitioning to the ask. I find that when I transition to the ask, sometimes it diminishes my personal brand because they've trusted me to provide valuable content. All of a sudden they're selling them stuff. And what do you recommend for a right way to make that transition?
So the question was, how do you make the transition between having built a brand through content and actually having people you're engaging with to actually making the ask without feeling awkward or feeling like you're selling out, right? Really, if you go back to this, there is a step in the middle. Sorry. No?
Okay, what do you need?
Just one back, the summary slide, right? Building the brand is not just about sharing content. It's really developing a relationship through that content. And the ask, you can't do it by just, I've delivered great content and then I can do the ask. You really need to develop a relationship with the people. And the content is a means of doing that, right? And so once you've developed, through the content you've delivered authority on that subject matter, right? People trust you, right? Credibility, familiarity. Those are the things that make it then very easy to make an ask that doesn't seem like a huge objectionable thing. I'll just give you an example. Just this past week, I had to go to a bank to get a document, to get what's it called, some kind of stamp done by the bank to certify that my signature is my signature. And I bank at Wells Fargo, and so I went into my branch that's closest to home. The people didn't know me there because I don't bank at that branch. I bank at the one that's close to my office. And I went in there and I asked the guy, hey, can you do this for me? I was told you could do this for free, right? Because I bank with you. And I'm sitting there and he's going to the back and he's coming back to me and then he comes back after an hour and says, sorry, we really can't do this. We know you bank here, but we just can't do this. So I spent an hour there. The guy didn't know me, right? There was no familiarity whatsoever. I then take the BART, go to the Wells Fargo that's right next to my office. I see those guys once every 2 weeks. They know me. They don't even ask me for my ID when I cash a check or anything like that. I went in there, did it in 5 minutes, didn't even ask a question, right? So familiarity and having that relationship is really, really important, before you make the ask. And then the ask becomes easy. It's just frictionless, right? Yes?
Yeah, so you say, do a lot of storytelling, create a lot of content that's engaging. Assuming you don't already have an established audience, how do you get that content to the right people when you're first starting out?
Yeah, so there's an interesting notion with content marketing. Just like, when you're building out a product and in the Lean Startup movement, there's this notion of product market fit. You gotta hit the product market fit, right? That's what the startup is about, is honing in on that. Well, in building your brand, you need to do the content audience fit. You need to find the content audience fit. And the audience doesn't necessarily come up by writing the content. There's an effort that you need to undertake, right? And through social media, it becomes easier because, and especially the networks that are more open, right? Where you can, like Twitter, for example, that's why I love Twitter. It's open. Anybody out there you can reach out to, you can follow. And so, you know, you start publishing your content so that people have something to respond to, but then look for people who are potentially like-minded. Start publishing your content. Use mechanisms to actually make your content more visible so that people will naturally find you. So for example, I know that the hashtag has been thrown around kind of as the next big thing, and I really think it is. If you're on Twitter and you're not using hashtags judiciously, but if you're not using hashtags, you're missing out on a huge audience. So let's say you're on Twitter, you have 100 followers, right? And you tweet a message. Well, 100 people, up to 100 people can see it, right? It doesn't mean they'll see it, right? Now, if you include a hashtag on a subject that people search on in your tweet, all of a sudden, anybody who goes on Twitter, who does a Twitter search on that particular hashtag, your tweet will show up. All of a sudden, you've increased your audience significantly. And if that content is interesting, right, and is of value, those are really important things, then they'll follow you as well, right? So that's, through your content, you can start building a following. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time, right? But focus first on who you are. What is your brand? What are the, you know, it's not like, what are the 100 things I'm going to talk about, right? What are the 3 things that are going to define me? Start with that. What are the 3 things? And then at most 10, right? Don't go beyond that. And then make sure those are things you're passionate about, that you're very knowledgeable about, and that you can either create or curate great content that's going to bring lots of value to an audience, right? And then just don't, if you're going to tweet it out or share it, don't just tweet out the title of the article all the time because everybody else is doing that, right? Find an interesting angle and add some value on top of that, right? And all of a sudden, people start recognizing that extra value and start following you. So again, it's not something that happens overnight, and there are tactics to, you know, build followings and things like that, but that's not what you want. You want an audience that's engaged, right?
If you don't use your personal identity to build your personal brand, is there a tax to that, or is there a negativity associated with not using your own kind of actual identity?
You know, if you're going to create a product or a company, right, it comes out of you, the real you, not a fake you, right? It comes out of not only your ideas, but out of your passions. And, you know, from my point of view, it's like, why would you want to cover that up with a pseudonym or an anonymous type of identity? You are a person. People relate to people. The trustworthiness and the familiarity is with a person, right? We've gone so far even as to kind of, on our Twitter account for our company. If you go to the next one, yeah. So this is my wife. She tweets out as Twylah. That's her avatar. It's not a company logo or anything like that. It's a person, right? And it is a person. If anybody tweets out and mentions her, she will respond. She takes a lot of pride in responding to everyone that mentions her. So, and honestly, you know, your identity and who you are is the only thing that follows you around for your whole life. And if you build up that equity over time, you know, you're going to gain more and more of that equity, right, for yourself.
I've noticed that a lot of professionals will have themselves out there on LinkedIn and Twitter. What is your opinion about people also using Facebook as a platform to build their personal brand? Beg your pardon.
Well, if you're building your personal brand, I think you should use as many mechanisms as possible, right? I have different views, and my views might not be congruous with yours, but I tend to see Facebook more as a place where you do CRM. It's people you already know, right? So yes, you probably want to be on Facebook because you want to relate to the people you already know, right? If you want to be in a place where you connect with people you don't know, and if you're building a business, you want to connect primarily with people you don't know because those are your prospects, right? Those are the people that eventually going to become customers. I think Twitter, Google Plus are much better places for that specifically. But yeah, you should have a presence on LinkedIn. You should have a great profile on LinkedIn. You should have and all your profiles should be congruous, right? It shouldn't be like they find a different person in each of those places. Great. Well, thank you.